4 a.m., Lord, don't it come way too soon? You think by now it'd be something you'd be used to. So put on your coffee and turn on the news. It's gonna be hot as hell, but at least the skies are blue. You're clocking them wore out, but you do what you gotta do. I know you're tired, I know you're hurting, I know you broke down to the bone. But your bills are paid and the smiling faces waiting on you at home. And it ain't always easy, it ain't ever like you planned, oh, but man, ain't it working man? Now you're going home while the sun's going down. You're still miles away, you can already hear the sound of a little voice saying, Daddy, come out and play. So you're still a couple more minutes from a damn good day. You're clocking them wore out and wouldn't want it any other way. I know you're tired, I know you're hurting, I know you broke down to the bone. But your bills are paid and there's smiling faces waiting on you at home. It ain't always easy, it ain't ever like you planned, oh, but man, ain't it working man? It's a sweat and blood and bruises, calloused hands, hard as can be. There's bread on the table, there's presents under the tree. I know you're tired, I know you're hurting, I know you broke down to the bone. But your bills are paid and there's smiling faces waiting on you at home. It ain't always easy, it ain't ever like you planned, oh, but man, ain't it working man? It ain't always easy, it ain't ever like you planned, oh, but man, ain't it working man?
Welcome. Thank you all for being here this special day to honor the life of Ian Watt and to honor his family as well. We're going to start off singing a hymn. Kay has picked a couple of hymns for us. Both of them tell of the love that God has for us, tell of a Savior's love, and that Savior that Ian loved so dearly himself. So I'd invite you to stand if you like. We're going to sing the Old Rugged Cross. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and and exchange it someday for a crown. Oh, that old rugged cross, so despised by the world, has a wondrous attraction for me. For the dear Lamb of God left his glory above to bear it to dark Calvary. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. To that old rugged cross I will ever be true, its shame and reproach gladly bear. Then he'll call me someday to my home far away, where his glory forever I'll share. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. Thanks. You may be seated.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to celebrate the life of Ian Watt. My name is Ron Elliott, and it's my honor to eulogize my Uncle Ian. I'd like to start out by talking about the way I felt about my uncle. Growing up, he was Uncle Ian the legend. Some of my earliest memories as a kid were loading up the station wagon in Ontario for the trek out to Dog Pound, Alberta, to stay at Uncle Ian's and Aunt Kay's. When I first arrived at the ranch, I always had to put together my Uncle Ian starter kit. This would start with a trip to the basement to find a pair of boots that were either worn out or some that Jamie had outgrew. After I had the boots lined up, I had to look for the other essentials. And if you knew Ian, that was a vest and usually a not-so-perfect cowboy hat. For your pockets then, you needed a jackknife, Scotch mints, and of course, chapstick. This is why I chuckle when I see everyone in Calgary for 10 days every summer dressing up what they think a cowboy is. Well, maybe a cowboy that didn't work. Then I was out to see the dogs. Bob and Sandy are the first that I remember. Once I familiarized with the dogs again, it was down to the barn or the pony pasture to find the horses. Old Buck is the horse that I always remember riding as a kid. Looking back, I know I was probably a smart aleck town kid from Ontario who knew nothing other than I wanted to be a rancher like he is. I'd follow him around and try to be like him for my whole time out here. He was always patient with me and nice, no matter how irritating I must have been. His patience and acceptance of me led me to me working for him in the summers while going to university, and then eventually moving out here to take up the ranching life alongside him. Bruce Landike also told me a story that's related to this. Bruce grew up around Ian, going to church groups and whatnot, and Ian was a 40-year-old invincible man in his eyes. Later on in life, Bruce was tasked with taking care of Ian at 75 years old, looking after 500 and some yearlings and trying to keep him safe. This was not always easy. Ian might have been 75 on the outside, but quite often still thought he was 40 and could do everything. Good job. He lived through it. Next, I'd like to talk about Ian the rancher. According to my mother, it was back in about 1950 where Ian made the choice to ranch. His father, my grandfather, was contemplating retirement and perhaps selling and wanted to gauge Uncle Ian's interest. Of course, Ian accepted. Many people probably think of Ian as a rancher / cowboy / cattleman. However, in my experience working alongside him, he was much more than that. Ian was into holistic management before that was even a thing. His approach to ranching was the grass and water were the assets, and the cattle were the tool to harvest that. If you didn't look after the grass, you soon wouldn't have to worry about the cattle because you wouldn't have them. That being said, Ian did have an eye for cattle and horses. He taught me how to read cattle when moving them and how to know what the cattle were going to do before they did it. He was a very competent and fearless horseman, whether he was riding alone or had one hand on a kid riding behind him. You better be ready and you better hang on. Maybe that's why his arms were so big from holding on to children behind him. Two sayings of Ian's that are etched in my mind forever when it comes to cattle are the fastest way to move cattle is slowly, and don't kill them with kindness. Anyone that's worked with me since then has heard me repeat these phrases often. Ian believed the cattle industry was built on handshakes and keeping your word. He forged long-term relationships with buyers like Ronnie Ward, where mutual trust and respect had both parties wanting to do business again. His love for cattle and grass and ranching didn't end when he moved to town. And last spring, he came out to visit while we were branding. I was so happy he came, and I think he thoroughly enjoyed it. Next, I would like to talk about Ian, the volunteer. For as long as I can remember, Uncle Ian was involved in many organizations: the Alberta Cattlemen's Fellowship, the Stockman's Memorial Foundation, the Foothills Forage Association, the Society for Range Management, and of course, the Western Stock Growers Association. Longtime friend and colleague Ernie Nimitz told me that Ian was instrumental on getting a few of these organizations started and off the ground. He took a lot of pride in teaching and learning. I remember as a young man going to the Alberta Cattlemen's Fellowship's pancake breakfast at the Stampede grounds, where they always presented the Stampede Queen and princesses with Bibles. As a member of the Stockman's Memorial Foundation, he helped fundraise for the Western Heritage Center in Cochrane, and I believe I have a brick there with my brand on it. As the president of the Western Stock Growers in 1982-83 was a highlight of his life too. It is the longest standing agricultural organization in Alberta. I remember the 100-year cattle drive in 1996, where we drove the cattle through CFB Suffield into Medicine Hat. I think this was a real proud moment that he got to share with so many of his family and friends. Locally, Ian also helped out at the Dog Pound Stampede and was always active in church groups. As a young man, Ian started school at Mount Hope. He then transferred to Dog Pound and went to high school in Red Deer afterwards. As a young man, he ran with Robert Stone and Don Luft, and I've heard from numerous sources they were a little on the wild side. I'm sure it was the other two leading my uncle astray mostly. As a young rancher, Ian sought the advice of many neighbors, and I remember stories of Bill Bagnall, Jordy McBain, and Ike Satchel, who were always helpful. As a kid, I remember Ian and Ike helping each other, often to the benefit of both. Ian, the family man. Ian was very proud of all of his family and loved everyone. He was blessed to have 3 kids, Jamie, Shelley, and Esther Lou. Ian always had time for everyone and made you feel welcome. Whatever activities you were interested in, he planned on attending, whether it be hockey, piano, dance, or show jumping. He was genuinely interested and would come watch or support whenever he could. When my family would make the trip west, we always had a place to stay. We were welcomed with open arms, regardless of how busy he may have been. My mother and Ian were close, and even the 2,000-mile separation did not make them drift apart. When Ian married Kay, her brother Ken Arsby and Father Martin were both welcomed with open arms. Ian, the husband. The story that I've heard is they met at a dance in Darty Hall over 62 years ago. And until Ian's last days, Ian and Kay were a team. Apparently, my Aunt Kay spotted Ian across the room and declared that was the man she was going to marry. Kind of like Babe Ruth pointing to the fence and calling her shot, and she didn't have to wait long for it to come to fruition. When working with Ian throughout the years, what Aunt Kay wanted or expected was always at the top of the list of things to do. And you didn't forget that. Or if you did, you hustled and tried to recover. Together, they raised a family, supported one another through the good times and bad, and were holding each other's hands right up until the end. Ian, the mentor. Throughout the years at the ranch, Uncle Ian mentored many young people, including yours truly. From Randy Watt, who you'll hear from later, working at the ranch, to Rick Stone, who was fostered by Ian and Kay, to Colin Walker, a neighbor, to Marcella and Elena from Uruguay, to me, and then to Jake Kroll, as well as many others along the way, I'm sure. In the 90s, I also remember Ian traveling to Kazakhstan to help them develop some more progressive agricultural practices after the fall of the Soviet Union. I know that today, Jake Kroll and I are both involved in ranching, and this is largely due to Ian's mentoring ability. Ian didn't yell or berate. He showed you how and led by example. He was probably the calmest person I've ever known and always thought before he spoke. He made things fun even when they weren't. I remember lancing abscesses on some bred heifers at my place west of Sundre, and him stabbing an abscess with his pocket knife, receiving a mouthful of pus. Okay, maybe I was the one that thought that was funny, and him not so much. The other thing about Ian, as many of you know, he was never in a hurry to get things done. He loved what he did, and he really didn't understand why everyone was rushing to go do something else. He wouldn't rush, he'd just start earlier if he had somewhere to go. That was another life lesson that I learned from him. You don't wake up based on the time you went to bed at. You go to bed based on the time you have to get up at. I remember living in the basement and him yelling, "Elliot, rise and shine," when I lived in the basement. And I knew better than not to get up after he hollered. Lastly, I'd like to talk about Ian the man. This last week has been full of reflection. What made Ian Ian? Ian was always reading and trying to be innovative and do things better. He never stopped learning. Patience. He had a boatload. Ian was a very patient man. It's been my observation this trait is not inherited easily. I'm sure if you know Jamie, Shelley, or Esther, you will agree. Self-control. Ian would stop, think, usually with one eye closed, holding his thumb to his finger, and calm down and collect his thoughts before snapping at someone. Other than politicians, I can't remember him saying a bad word about someone. He just wouldn't talk about them. Uncle Ian had a very good habit of always making it about you. He seldom talked to himself and really made you feel important. Even in his later years, when his body was breaking down and you knew he must be hurting, he didn't complain. He was more interested in how you were feeling. His sense of humor and looking on the bright side. Look for the good. It's easy to see the bad. Don't take everything too seriously. Laugh and enjoy. The last week, I think, was the last chapter of Ian mentoring me. Upon reflection, I see that I need to be nicer, be patient, help others, and remember what is truly important. I need to walk the walk. He didn't talk about doing things right. He did it and led by example. Metaphorically, he's left his footprints, and I realize they may not be the easiest to follow, but I need to try harder to do it. In closing, Uncle Ian made a difference in a lot of lives, and we all benefited having knowing him. I know I will think of him often, and his legend will only grow in my mind. Thank you.
Don't it come way too soon? You think by now it'd be something you'd be used to. So put on your coffee and turn on the news. It's gonna be hot as hell, but at least the skies are blue. You're clocking in wore out, but you do what you gotta do. I know you're tired, I know you're hurting, I know you broke down to the bone. But your bills are paid and the smiling faces waiting on you at home. And it ain't always easy, it ain't ever like you planned, oh, but man, ain't it working man. Now you're going home while the sun's going down. You're still miles away, you can already hear the sound of a little voice saying, Daddy, come out and play. So you're still a couple more minutes from a damn good day. You're clocking in wore out, wouldn't want it any other way. I know you're tired, I know you're hurting, I know you broke down to the bone. But your bills are paid and there's smiling faces waiting on you at home. It ain't always easy, it ain't ever like you planned, oh, but man, ain't it working man. It's a sweat and blood and bruises, calloused hands hard as can be. There's bread on the table, presence under the tree. I know you're tired, I know you're hurting, I know you broke down to the bone. But your bills are paid and there's smiling faces waiting on you at home. And it ain't always easy, it ain't ever like you planned, all but man, ain't it working man. It ain't always easy, it ain't never like you planned, all but man, ain't it working man.
He was a giant when I was just a kid. I was always trying to do everything he did. I can still remember every lesson he taught me. Growing up, learning how to be like my old man. He was a lion. We were a father's pride, but I was defiant when he made me walk the line. He knew how to lift me up and when to let me fall. Looking back, he always had a plan. My old man. My old man, feel the callus on his hands and dusty overalls. My old man, now I finally understand. I have a lot to learn from my old man. Now I'm a giant, got a son of my own. He's always trying to go everywhere I go. Do the best I can to raise him up the right way, hoping that he someday wants to be like his old man. I know one day we'll meet again. As he's looking down, my old man, I hope he's proud of who I am. I'm trying to fill the boots of my old man.
Tell me about the good old days. Sometimes it feels like this world's gone crazy. Grandpa, take me back to yesterday, when the line between right and wrong didn't seem so hazy. Did lovers really fall in love to stay and stand beside each other, come what may? Was a promise really something people kept, not just something they would say? Did families really bow their heads to pray? Did daddies really never go away? Oh, oh, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Grandpa, everything is changing fast. We call it progress, but I just don't know. And Grandpa, let's wander back into the past, then paint me the picture of long ago. Did lovers really fall in love to stay and stand beside each other, come what may? Was a promise really something people kept, not just something they would say and then forget? Did families really bow their heads to pray? Did daddies really never go away? Oh, oh, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Oh, oh, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Didn't know today would be our last, that I'd have to say goodbye to you so fast. I'm so numb, I can't feel anymore. Praying you just walk back through that door and tell me that I was only dreaming. You're not really gone as long as I believe. There will be another angel around the throne tonight. Your love lives on inside of me, and I will hold on tight. It's not my place to question, only God knows why. I'm just jealous of the angels around the throne tonight. so small, and you were always there to catch me when I'd fall. In a world where heroes come and go, well, God just took the only one I know. So I'll hold you as close as I can, longing for the day when I see your face again. But until then, God must need another angel around the throne tonight. Your love lives on inside of me, and I will hold on tight. It's not my place to question, only God knows why. I'm just jealous of the angels around the throne tonight, singing hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I'm just jealous of the angels around the throne tonight.
And as they were afraid and bowed down their faces to the earth, they said unto them, Why seek ye the living among the dead? When the group of women, among them Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Mary, the mother of James, went to the sepulchre to anoint the body of our Savior, they found the stone rolled back, and two angels spoke those words unto them, Why seek ye the living among the dead? James Ian Watt is not among the dead. He is among the living, alive in Christ. While we cannot see him, while he has shed the constraints of his mortal body, his presence is here. In our hearts because of his love, in our minds because of his words, in our actions because of his example. My name is Randy Watt, and yes, I know that is confusing. It was as confusing as well to the receptionist at the medical office in 1965 when the name Watt was called and two people stood up. That's how these two unrelated Watt families met. From that, a friendship based mostly on my family's needs and Ian and Kay's Christian charity was formed. My mother and dad were U.S. citizens, my father being an adventurous sort who wanted to go to war before the U.S. did. So he came north and he joined the RCAF, and after storied service, he went home to Kansas, but he returned within a couple of years to fly the Bush in eastern Canada. He continued his aviation career, retiring in 1985 as the Director of Air Transport for the province of Alberta. I had three brothers and one little sister. Our two families met when we were quite young, but the years had passed and problems with my siblings began. When my oldest brother, Tim, began to be an issue, and police officers began to appearing at our house in northwest Calgary, my dad asked Ian if he and hard work could straighten Tim out. Ian and Kay invited Tim into their home, and a different education began. There's a section of barbed wire fence on the old farm. I can't remember if it was half a mile long or a mile long, but it was my brother's penance. My brother grew from his experiences over a few years on the farm, and he turned out a pretty good guy. May he rest in peace. I was not a problem child, as I was my mother's favorite. I just wanted to work on the farm. So starting at the age of around 10, I began spending my full summers and some weekends, when we were living close enough, on the Watt farm. I learned how to drive tractors and trucks, how to cut and rake hay. harvest grain, pack silage, how to saddle, care for, and ride horses, count cattle, administer medicines and vaccines, and brand cattle with the Rafter VC brand. I learned to do what many young men my age could only dream of doing, all at the hands of Ian and Kay. Oh, I could tell you some stories. I could talk about Ian separating Jamie and I over the first few years when we were both vying for the alpha pup position on the farm. One thing about Jamie, he never gave up. And I know his dad was secretly proud, and I believe Kay was too, but moms are not allowed to encourage their son's violence. I could talk about Ian tying the rope with a pull rake to my foot when I was 12 because I didn't have enough arm strength to pull the cord and activate the cogs to lift it and dump the hay. But he needed me to rake hay, and by heck, I was going to rake hay. I could talk about him offering my first dip as I was driving the silage packing tractor. After I fell out of the tractor sick and puking, I was cured. Have never touched it since. I could talk about earning my first ever paycheck the next summer when he handed me a check for $75 for 4 months' work and said I'd earned it. I can't recall ever being prouder of the praise received in that moment. I could talk about him taking me up to the Grease Creek Ranch and dropping me off to help Bob Goodenough for a few days at a time and telling me I needed to work hard and listen to Bob and learn a few things. I could talk about him taking me into my first bar at 16 years of age. The drinking age was 18 in Alberta then, and as we just finished several hard days on the Grease Creek Ranch, and he wanted a draft beer on the way home, but I was with him. He could have had me wait in the truck while he and Bob wet their whistles, but instead he said, "You work as hard as any man. I guess you can have a beer like any man." I could tell you many stories, but that's not what's important to me. Let me tell you what's important to me. Let me tell you what I really learned at his and Kay's hands. I owe a great deal of who I am and what I am to them. I've been very successful in life, and Ian and Kay's examples and lessons played a key role. What did I learn? I learned the power of self-sufficiency through helping tend the garden and the chickens, my first two responsibilities on the farm. By the way, Kay, I still detest chickens. I won't even eat the darn things if I can avoid it. I learned a work ethic that is second to none, gained by working from sunup until well after sundown. I learned about self-discipline through the need to be sure to earn my keep and earn Ian's praise. I learned how to laugh when things went wrong, like stepping on a nail while tearing down an old shed, but then getting right back to work because things needed to be done. I learned how to fix things, because if you didn't fix them, work stopped, and that just couldn't happen. I learned how to cultivate a straight line, and what a powerful lesson that turned out to be. I learned how a man should love and care for his wife, and how she would reciprocate by watching Ian and Kay love each other no matter what. I learned how to control my temper by watching Ian, because he was always cool, no matter what happened. I learned what's really important and what's just fluff. I learned to earn an honest man's dollar, as Ian put it, and most importantly, I learned the power of example because there was no bigger one in my life. Ian and Kay's greatest gift to me, though, was I learned to be Christian in all my doings, just as they were. When my mother was killed in a car accident on the road to Carstairs in 1978, Ian and Kay were the first ones there to offer solace to my family. Later, when my dad was struggling greatly with raising a 13-year-old daughter and failing at it, Kay opened her heart and her home to my little sister. Kay, I love you for what you did for my family all those years ago. And I owe you a debt, you and Ian, a debt I can never repay. Jamie, Shelley, Esther Lou, I love each of you for the times we had together. Important times in my development. Ian, I'm glad your suffering is over and that you've gone home. I look forward to seeing you there when it's my turn. Please have a horse broke for me. I'd love to ride with you again. I testify to all here today that the day will soon come that was spoken of by Paul in his epistle to the Thessalonians when he said, "The Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Ian Watt will be among them.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Danielle, and Ian was my grandpa. A true legend. My grandpa was a strong, kind, and resilient man who was full of love, loyalty, and jokes. He had such a warm and respectful nature, and when he wasn't caring for our family, he was spreading wisdom and making everyone around him smile. His passion and love for animals was truly inspiring to me. I loved going out to the ranch as a kid. I was always excited to see the animals, but definitely more excited to see him. As I grew up and grew closer to him, I saw the influence he had. He taught me to always be tough, but always be kind. I look forward to seeing my grandpa at every opportunity. Even just being in his presence gave me so much joy. I love listening to the stories he told, and I will continue to enjoy sharing these and listening to others speak about him. My grandpa taught us about the importance of family and loyalty. He took care of his family and children, who now carry those same values into their families. I remember when I was maybe 9 or 10, we were going out to BC and we stopped and stayed overnight at a hotel with a 3-story water slide. That's the only thing my sister and I wanted to do. We were both ecstatic when Grandpa climbed the stairs and came crashing down the long, twisting slide. Whenever he would walk into the room, the mood shifted. He had a positive impact everywhere he went. He never failed to make anyone laugh, and even just his smile could light up a room. People like my grandpa are 1 in a million, and I can only hope to grow up to be half the person he was. Thank you, Grandpa. I love you.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Esther's oldest daughter and Ian's granddaughter, Jaylene. Famously said by Winnie the Pooh, how lucky I am to have something so special that makes saying goodbye so hard. Grandpa, this was one of my hardest goodbyes. Ian, Papa, Dad, brother, uncle, father-in-law, husband, or whoever he was to you, special is an understatement. There were many special moments that I had with him, one of my most memorable being when my mom and grandpa went to pick up a new horse. I remember anxiously waiting for him and my mom to return. Soon enough, they pulled into the barnyard with the trailer and out came Shorty. I asked Grandpa if I could ride him and was given the go-ahead. He was saddled up and up I went. I decided to take Shorty over to meet the other horses, which I had assumed would be fast friends. Shorty did not like my plans and decided as we slowly trotted over, he would brake check me and turn around faster than I could ever imagine. Before I knew it, I was doing my trick riding debut. I held onto the horn for dear life and the rest of my body flew every which way. My parents both tried to stop Shorty with no luck, which didn't end up mattering because as we ran out of the corral into the barnyard, I screamed to get off Shorty. Grandpa said, "No, you can stay on." And when Shorty finally decided he was done running for the hills, I asked, with my one remaining boot, "Can I get off now?" And once again, Grandpa told me to keep on riding. Aside from the memories I shared with him that made him special to me, I wondered what made my grandpa so special to everyone else. It wasn't that he wore cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. It wasn't that he spent countless hours in hockey rinks or dance theaters. It was not because he had incredible children or amazing grandchildren, nor was it because of his beautiful wife that he got to spend a lifetime loving. No matter who you were, who you knew, or where you came from, he was your friend. And that is what made him so special. The definition of friend is a person whom one knows, likes, and trusts. And Grandpa, I know you made every person you met feel like this. He really put meaning behind salt of the earth. He was a great grandfather, an amazing cowboy, but most importantly, he was a really, really good human. Saddle up, cowboy. This was truly your life. I know you're not with us right now, but your life was led by example, and along the way, you gave pieces of yourself to so many of those around you. You sat tall in the saddle, and you rode so well. I am so beyond fortunate to have had the absolute pleasure of knowing you. God will lead you up to heaven, and he will ride at your side. So once again, cowboy, it's time for your final ride.
Hello, I'm Paul Troyan. I'm a son-in-law of Ian and Kay. I'm married to Esther. And that starts where it all kind of started. Ian and Kay were in town for some meetings and a couple appointments, and I said, "Are you available for lunch or coffee?" And they said, "Yes, yes, yes." And what happened is their appointments went a little longer than expected, and I wasn't able to meet them in person to ask for Esther's hand in marriage. So I had a phone on the next day at home at the ranch, and Kay answered, and I said, "Is Ian available?" "Yes, he's here." So she passed the phone off to Ian, and I said, "Sorry I missed you. I know I've been busy. Your schedule's been busy this week," and so forth and so forth. And then I asked him, I said, "I'd like to ask your permission to marry your daughter, Esther." And there was a bit of a pause. And he came back and he goes, "Well, if all parties involved are in agreement, it's okay with me." So I fastly knew that Ian was a good communicator on the phone. So the next time he phoned me, and he goes, "I got something to ask you." I go, "Okay." He goes, "I think your daughter Jaylene, anyways, we got a dog we're going to get her for Christmas." I said, "Oh, is that right?" He goes, "Oh, it's a fine dog. We looked at a few, Kay and him. I guess we're dog hunting, not to our avail." And he said, "Oh, it's a nice, great male dog, non-shedding, no problem." So, anyways, Christmas Day came, and so did the dog. It was female and shedding. But it was a good dog. It was a great dog. It was a great dog for a family. It actually passed away this past June. 15 years we got, so it was great. Then I married into a ranching family, and I found out it became free labor. So I was at work one day, came home, and one of my buddies was with me, and I checked the answering machine. You remember those things. Anyways, and there's messages on there, and Ian goes, "Paul, Brandon, Friday, 1:30, be there, pickup. Bring your pickup." That was it. It wasn't like, "Are you available? What's going on?" Just that was it, and it was great. And I learned to brand, I learned to inoculate, I learned a lot of things on those several days. And also learned about prairie oysters. Not sure, we can talk about recipes later. Another story I have about Ian is we had a bunch of yearlings coming in, and there's a processing shed there where you put the yearlings into a squeeze, and you do inoculations, antibiotics, the actual branding, and you take temperatures, that type of thing. So he had this digital temperature gauge, and he had coveralls on, and these big black gloves on in his hat. And he reads out the temperature, and they log it down, that type of thing. And then, anyways, he has this big probe he pulls out from the hind end of the yearling, and he says, "Hey, Paul, want your temperature taken?" I said, "I'll pass." As you know, Ian was involved, and I had the pleasure of going to the Old Time Rangeman's dinner every stampede. It's a Tuesday of every stampede. Ian enjoyed his time there with all his other fellow rangemen, and he also was honored to be the Rangeman of the Year in the year 2010. It was a great achievement for him, and he was very honored to receive that award. And I don't know if you know some of Ian's sayings, but I wrote a couple down here I really liked. He said, "Paul, it's darker than the inside of a felt hat." Or he'd say, "She's no bigger than a keg kicked over." Not sure what that meant, but. And he says, "Don't you know grass doesn't grow on a war, sorry. Doesn't grow, sorry. I mixed that one up. The last story I have is when Ian was down in Palm Springs, and Kay, we were on vacation. Esther and I went out grocery shopping. We were sharing a 2-bedroom condo unit. We had a few friends with us as well. Came in, and there was Ian in his shorts, cowboy boots on, his hat, and he had the blender going full tilt. And I said, what are you doing? Making margaritas for Kay and I. Do you want one? It was quite a funny moment. Anyways, I will miss Ian. He'll be here in my thoughts, in my prayers, and in my heart. And he was an honor to have him as a father-in-law. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here today. I'm glad we can all gather to celebrate and remember the wonderful life of Ian. For those of you who don't know, this is Shelley. I'm her daughter, Caitlin. This is my brother, Austin, beside me, and we are speaking on behalf of all of us. That includes Tyler, Andrew, and Seth, my other brothers. My brothers and I grew up seeing Ian and Kate a lot, as they were our only set of grandparents, and so we spent a lot of time with them as kids. While there are a lot of memories, some of the most fondest memories from many of us grandkids included just being at the ranch with Papa. Papa was a true rancher through and through. He loved riding, working the cattle, and also teaching all the grandkids about the ways of ranching. It was his passion. He was a great role model. He worked hard every single day and was one of the kindest mans I knew. While some of you may think that growing up with a cowboy for Grandpa, you would hear a lot of bad words, anger, and yelling, that was not the case with Papa. While he may have got a bit excited from time to time, none of us ever recall him getting angry. He was always kind with his words and as patient as he could be, even when we all tried our best some days to push him to the edge. He was a Christian man that was very devoted to God. There were many times we would all have to come in from the fields with Papa to host a local Bible study at their place. And every Tuesday, without fail, we attended Cowboy Church at the ranch house in Cochrane. I can also remember countless times that Nana and Papa took my brothers and I to other local Bible studies throughout the week. Papa's life seemed to revolve around mainly two things, ranching and God. If Papa was not manning his own ranch, he was always helping his family or friends with theirs. If I had to wrap it up in a few short words, I would say that Papa resembled a true cowboy, hardworking, kind, and selfless. He always had a smile on his face that was contagious and loved to joke around with everyone. He was truly all that his grandkids could have asked for, and we will all hold his memories dear to our hearts. He will be missed by many, and we know now that he is in a better place. I have a couple personal memories that I was asked to share for my younger brothers that were unable to be here with us today. One thing I will never forget was getting to work with Papa and saddling the horses in the barn before sunrise, then riding off into the fields while the sun came up. The meaning of hard work and respect is something that Papa passed down through generations. Another favorite memory was when Nana and Papa would drive us kids to piano lessons, and every time after our lessons, they would take us to our favorite ice cream shop for a treat. Papa, you will be dearly missed. We love you. And I would just like to close with a Bible verse. Psalm 116 says, I love the Lord, for he heard my voice. He heard my cry for mercy. Because he turned his ear to me, I will call on him as long as I live. The cords of death entangle me. The anguish of the grave came over me. I was overcome by distress and sorrow. Then I called on the name of the Lord. Lord, save me. The Lord is gracious and righteous. Our God is full of compassion. The Lord protects the unwary. When I was brought low, he saved me. Return to your rest, my soul, for the Lord has been good to you. For you, Lord, have delivered me from death, my eyes from tears, my feet from stumbling, that I may walk before the Lord in the land of the living.
Good afternoon. I'm Austin Fighton, the second oldest of the Fighton clan. Thank you all for being here to celebrate Papa's life. We are all so grateful for our time spent with Papa, and all the wonderful memories of being on the ranch will never be forgotten. His passion for ranching was unmatched, and the family values he instilled in his children will be passed on for generations. Whether it was helping work cattle, fix fence, or going out to shoot gophers, Papa was always happy to have his grandkids around. His anger never got the best of him. He was always very patient, but for some reason, there's a distinct sound of his voice that we would hear whenever JD seemed to be around. JD! JD would just be sitting there, "What, Papa?" Tyler and I spent many afternoons at the house watching cartoons, and we can remember always getting into his after eight chocolates and his peanut mix stashed in the corner of the living room. We got in trouble for a few times when he'd come in and see there wouldn't be anything left. But once again, his anger was nothing more than him saying, "You guys better quit eating all my treats." Being out in the farm truck shooting gophers, I think, is something we all remember well. Papa taught us all how to shoot, and I know he was very happy to have us help trying to get rid of all those rodents. He also showed us how to snare gophers around the house and barns. His many years of frustrations with those rodents bring back some great memories for us. As some of you may know, in 2017, when my wife Paula and I got married, we were able to come back to the ranch to take some beautiful photos before it was sold. It's a place that all of us hold close to our hearts. Nana and Papa celebrated their 62nd wedding anniversary this past year, and it's such an inspiration to all of us. Now I'd like to just share one quick personal story. There was one afternoon, Mom wasn't able to take me to hockey practice, and she asked Papa if he could drive me. Of course, he said yes, so Mom dropped me at the house where I worked on my homework for the afternoon. When it was getting close to us having to leave, he still wasn't at the house. So I walked down to the barn, couldn't find him. I jumped on the quad, headed to the field where he was in the tractor. I stopped him and I said, "Papa, are you still able to take me to hockey?" He replied, "Yes, when do we have to leave?" I said, 5 minutes ago. So he kicked the tractor into high gear and we bounced our way back to the house. I remember thinking to myself, my coach is going to be so mad, I'm going to have to blame this one on Papa. So we finally get in the car, and I could tell he felt bad we were going to be late. So he kicks the car and drive, and I didn't know I was going to be in for the ride of my life. We squealed the tires out of the driveway, and I absolutely flew to Cochrane. I was just hanging on nervously as we passed every vehicle on the 22 that day. I remember looking over at one point, and I think we were doing about 180 down the road, and I didn't know his Nissan Altima went that fast. I don't remember exactly how long it took us, but we made it to practice just on time, and he avoided me blaming him for being late. Papa, you are one of a kind. I'm so glad your great-grandson Sterling was able to meet you. You taught us not only about ranching, but how to be the best person you can be. You are an inspiration to all of us by the way you carried yourself, how you treated people, your love for God, and your love for your family. Say hi to Harvey for us. We love you.
I'd like to thank each of you for taking time to come and celebrate Dad with us. This is amazing to share these stories and hear them. And my dad, I believe, was a wonderful father and a great example as he walked the talk and did little talking. Often during my younger years, I would try and finish his sentences for him because he took too long. As I was reminiscing, I remembered a Sunday school teacher, a neighbor who told me, if we can do as good as our parents, then that would be good. At the time, it made little sense, and I did not know exactly the impact that statement would have on me. Anyway, as I was digging through my pictures and keepsakes, I stumbled upon a little story of Dad's. This was his testimony or story back when he was about 40, a little less than halfway through his life. I like reading this because these are Dad's words, and they were comforting to hear him talk even through this pamphlet. I'm going to give you the paraphrased version. Ian Watt, rancher. I was born during the Great Depression, at the end of the real horsepower era and the emergence of the internal combustion engine, a world of constant change. I was born to a family with a long Christian heritage. However, even though my grandparents came from Scotland with deep Presbyterian roots, which they imparted to their children, our home was not a religious one. After meeting and marrying a fine Christian girl and becoming the parent of three great kids, I began attending church on a regular basis. And through no conscious effort on my part, the environment I functioned in would change. My relationship with certain individuals contributed to my changed life, and he names his wife Kay, Leonard Friesen, and Art McKinnon. He explains after a particularly stressful period, he asked Christ into his heart and became a Christian. Continuing on, he says, being a Christian does not isolate us from adversities that we all must face from time to time. He says it's easy for ranchers to pray for more rain, for it to stop raining, for more heat, for less heat, for bigger calves, for higher prices. But the bigger question is, do we ask to be in God's will and purpose in all we do? He continues on, and then he says, I am reminded that God will do his work, but we must do ours. Dad, you did your work, and you left big boots to fill. We love you and miss you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for coming. We didn't get the Watt side didn't get the memo on everyone speaking, so I've got to figure out how to cut this in half and not repeat too many things. But anyone who hasn't met me here, my name is JD Watt. I am Ian's oldest grandchild, and I'm up here to speak on behalf of my dad's family, James Watt. Before I start, I want to thank all of you. I mean, it means a lot to have everyone here, and we've got some great people. I understand there's a busload from Rocky Ridge that's out here, and I know Papa loved it there. So thank you for coming and supporting him. Also to the families and RJ, Ronnie, and Randy. Thanks for those tributes and really capturing what amazing a man he was. Ian is Papa to me and my sister. And if you knew Papa, he was never really in a hurry to get anywhere fast, like Ron said. So I'm going to take my time a little bit here and share some good stories and celebrate. And hopefully we have some more laughs and cries. My dad, James, my mom, Cindy, and my sister, Sammy, were very fortunate to be able to grow up on the Watt homestead just down the hill from Nana and Papa. As a result, we all got to spend some pretty quality time with Papa. It seemed like almost every day. I believe the term Papa has a little North American and Scottish flair to it. As you know, Watt is Scottish. And over the years, I've told a few people that I think Papa, Dad, and I are like the three most proud Scotsmen that have never set foot in or were born in Scotland. But I know one day we'll get there, and Papa will be tagging along with us and taking in the agricultural processes and enjoying the beauty. And you can bet he'll be looking up long-lost relatives and having a cup of coffee and chatting like there's no degrees of separation. Papa was always an early riser. Ron mentioned it a little bit, but Dad recalls one of his many rules for him as a teenager or young adult. The later he came in at night, the earlier he'd wake up in the morning to go to work. Dad said he would get a holler down the stairs to wake up, and if he wasn't up immediately, Papa would be down the stairs with a 5-gallon bucket of cold water that would be promptly poured on top of Dad's head. But Dad finds a win in every story, and he found great pleasure in the fact that Nana would give him shit for soaking the mattress. The day would begin, and so many of our memories and learnings with Papa would live on with us forever. I know I said he was never in a hurry to get anywhere, but I don't want that to be confused with lazy. Lazy wasn't in his vocabulary. He was quite task-oriented, kind of like anything that needed to get done got done. Unfortunately, I didn't get the task-oriented trait from Papa, but one of the best compliments I have ever received in my life is, "You are a lot like your Papa." I can only assume what they mean by that is our calm demeanors and our really good looks. My wife, Maddie, told me not to say that, but I called an audible. But I'm quite proud of that. I could have done without the ear hairs and the nose hairs, though. When Papa and I were out riding on a windy day, it was quite the scene. The wind would come up and our nose hairs would be shh. I wish I had his forearms though. He was a strong man. Papa always had some great one-liners. You've heard a few of them today and some quotes. Ron talked about the fastest way to move cattle is slowly. Papa and I understood this concept a lot better than some of our family members. I'm not going to mention any names, but let's just say when we moved cattle together without any outside influence, there was a lot less fence to fix afterwards. Sammy and I have had an ongoing battle as to who was a better rider between us. She, to be fair, spent a lot more time on the ranch than I as I moved away to play hockey at about the age of 16. But when Sammy was looking for validation, she'd ask Papa, Papa, who was a better rider? He'd say, oh, I don't know, right? He was a bad liar, though. Classic Papa. He always wanted everyone to feel good. He was Switzerland in a lot of debates. Days on the ranch were hard work, but days I wouldn't trade for anything. It didn't matter who was there. Everyone was working. Even Mom. Mom was working all day long. If it wasn't cattle stuff, she was out there manicuring that ranch. And the VC ranch, I mean, it always looked sharp. I asked Mom if she had anything she wanted to say about Papa. She said, I have so many precious memories with Ian. I had such a great relationship with my father-in-law. I loved him like my own father. I had the pleasure of working with him for 26 years, and he was an amazing man that could communicate with you without saying anything at all. He was the glue of the Watt family. It was the hard work that Papa instilled in all of us. I learned very early that Saturday and Sunday afternoons were not for relaxing. That was actually when you got the most work done because you weren't at school or playing sports. And if you weren't doing the regular, checking cows, calves, or feeding cattle, checking fence, fixing fence, you were most definitely in the shop fixing some sort of equipment, the tractors, the lawnmowers, Baler King. It was always something. And if it wasn't that, you're cleaning the shop, you're cleaning the barn, you're picking rocks, melting the baler twine off the Baler King, shooting gophers. There's just always something to do. But Papa was he was there for all of it. He wasn't up at the house or he was just with us the whole time. And he had a way of making it fun. You'd stop, take breaks, have a coffee, a pop for the kids, and visit with friends, and let you drive the truck. I remember driving that old green Dodge, and a couple of pictures there, turning hay at the age of 10 years old. They had to prop me up so I could see through the window, and just around and around you go. And it was a process to stop it because I couldn't reach the pedals. But he'd let you do all that, and let you shoot gophers even when he could have shot it himself. He wanted to give you that chance. Branding days, I think all the grandkids can remember. He's castrating, and you're tied up, holding the calf down, gritting down, and he'd take that fresh testicle, put it on your shoulder, and like you're freaking out. He loved that. His personal favorite was getting you with the electric fence, and a lot of us can remember that. And it didn't matter how prepared you were or how many times you did it, he'd still get you. And you'd try to get him back, and he'd appreciate that. He'd respect you for trying. And then when you think you had him, and you're like, hey, I'm not going to fall for these tricks anymore, he'd wait for you to walk by him, and then he'd grab the fence and grab you at the same time, and you'd get it twice as bad. And he would laugh and laugh. He just never left a days of work wishing like you had been doing something else. It was amazing how he worked it. I've got a little bit in here about ranchers loving their animals, and I think enough people have talked about it, but he really did. He always had a good dog by his side, and he taught us a lot of lessons about life and death. Dad talked about one of his most painful memories, riding Buck. I think this is the second generation of Buck, and Dad's favorite horse, and he twisted his gut, and Papa made him go put it down, and which is a tough thing for a young person to do, especially when you love the horse so much. He saved a lot of calves in cold weather, and complicated births. He was good out there. He was so good with the cattle, and we learned so much from him. Just walking through the cattle, checking the feeders, and you're barely moving. He says you don't need to get them moving much. He was looking at their eyes, pink eye, foot rot. Look at their ears there. Look how they're breathing, and walking through, and then calving season was a special time for us, and he teaches so many things about that as well, and yeah, some good life lessons on the ranch about life and death. I want to share a couple stories, some one-liners again, some advice. Dad remembers one time he was playing hockey the night before, and he had gotten a fight and got cut up a little bit. So he's at the hospital getting some stitches, and I think he was stitched up above the eye and down the face. And in the morning, he was slow getting up to go to work, and I can only imagine how that goes. He's slow getting out of the house, and Papa's probably got the tractor ready, and he's got to go feed cattle. But Papa's probably annoyed that he's late getting out of there, and he's got the tractor warmed up, and he's coming down the stairs of the tractor. He sees Dad, and he has a little quick look at him and sees the stitches all over his face, but doesn't really give him much attention. Just keeps walking and says to him on the way by, "You're not that good at that, are you?" He would later give Dad some good hawk advice that was Gordie Howe-like. Jamie, when someone's coming to hit you, make sure you hit them first. Describing something like I would call a stiff shoulder, and you see a lot of it in the NHL today, but good advice. Talked to Ron today, and Ron said he lost a lot of weight in the summers working on the farm, and how hard a work it was. And Papa's line to, I think, a lot of us was, "You just think you're working hard." As much of a mentor and a leader as he was, he also didn't mince with words. He had a way of getting a point across to get you to take initiative, to do things yourself. James, he would say, "If I had to tell you to do it every time, I might as well just do it myself." When we bought Papa the quad later in life, it took a while, he coined it the Japanese quarter horse. In most of recent years, when I've gained a little bit of weight after hockey, every time Papa would see me, he'd look at me and go, as Ozzy would say, "JD, you're getting to be quite a big boy," and he'd always kind of go like that. And it was more of a hint than an insult, and I appreciated it. But he just said he had a way with the words and getting a point across. He would tell Dad, you're not changing people's minds, and don't try to do it. He says, "Jamie, nobody likes being told they're stupid." One piece of advice that didn't get taught to me verbatim, but was definitely reiterated through Dad, was a valuable skill and lesson in life that I try to use every day regarding conversing with others. Papa would tell Dad, "Jamie, quit telling them about yourself. They don't find you that interesting. Ask them questions about them." And he was a good conversationalist. Ronnie kind of mentioned it or alluded to it a little bit, but having a convo with Papa, he'd make you feel really good about you, and you'd feel great leaving the convo, and then you'd feel guilty. You never got time to ask him questions about himself. And he was just so good at it. We were going to neighbors' houses and moving cattle, whatever, picking up, dropping off farm equipment, sharing, which we did a lot of. You'd think you're done and going home, and if there was someone there, you'd had at least an hour of chit chatting with someone. I'll miss his mannerisms. He'd be in the house for lunch, coffee. Mom would say after a second or third coffee, "Andy, you want another coffee?" He'd go, "Sure," or "Might as well," or "I don't see why not." And it was even better when you're asking him about his dessert preference. "Papa, do you want apple pie, banana cream pie, or blueberry grunt?" Papa's reply, "Yes, please," or "Yep." All of the grandkids will fondly remember when Nana was ribbing on Papa a little bit and his mind was on another task. But Nana wouldn't let up, and he would do the famous, "God darn it, Kay!" or as kind of like Austin said, "Kathleen." He didn't speak a lot, but we sure have some great recollections of his lines. He had such a good sense of humor, and he did some wild things. Some of these have been told to me, and I don't really remember, but allegedly, and this is confirmed confirmed by Aunt Sheila. Papa, when hungry and looking for a snack, I can almost guarantee that Nana would have been in town or not home for this, but he would get 2 pieces of white bread, butter them up, line it with sugar, and have himself a sugar sandwich. Dad remembers walking to the shop one day, and there was Papa trying to weld a diesel tank onto the old case tractor with diesel in it. He must not have thought wasn't that flammable. He thought so. I was then told that Papa in some badger killing escapades, and there was a lot of that. There's a lot of badgers around then. He'd drown the badger out of the hole, and he'd wait for it with barbed wire and try to catch the badger on the other side with barbed wire. I think you got to be a little more crazy than tough to do something like that. But, Papa had a lifelong battle with gophers. We're all involved with it. We had a gazillion of them. He had read somewhere over the course of a year, I think it was 63 gophers that would eat as much grass as one cow throughout a year. And then the obvious, making the holes that our animals could step in and break their legs. So it was a valid war. But Papa never, ever came close to winning this battle. And it wasn't for a lack of trying. At first, the strychnine poison mixed with some oats. We'd go around and knock it down the holes. This was the most effective gopher euthanizer. But unfortunately, any bird that ate a dead gopher, any animal that ate a dead gopher would feel the effects too. So we had to stop doing that. We lost a couple dogs to that. But then it was back to the good old 22, one shot at a time. We couldn't get much progress with that until Papa was reading in a magazine one day that juicy fruit gum, if a gopher eats it, it would clog up its intestines and kill it. So I don't remember how many pallets or truckloads of juicy fruit gum he ordered, but it was a lot. And then after it was delivered, the frugality of Papa, we had to take each and every gum out of the juicy fruit container and cut it in half to double the supply. So there we are, walking in a line and going by every hole, dropping juicy fruit gum in, juicy fruit gum. Take a full day doing this, and you still wouldn't get half the holes anyways. And then you'd wait. And I think the next day we might have saw maybe a half a dozen dead gophers on the ground. But Papa would justify this, and he'd say, I'm sure they just died down the hole. But none of these were as crazy as the gopher blaster. And I can't remember if he read about this contraption in a magazine or he just designed it himself. But if you can picture this, a dolly with big wheels and a couple, natural gas tanks on it, a big long hose with a valve on it, and an igniter. So we're lugging this big thing around, and you'd find a little area with, there's some gophers around there, but some good holes, and you'd put it in there, you'd turn the gas on, and you'd adhere to some sort of time limit for how long you should put it down there. But that got a little bit longer and longer, and then you'd ignite it. And you can picture it right now, and it's exactly what you're picturing. Dirt and debris and flames coming out of there. Like, this is an explosion. We'd be shut down by any authorities immediately, but every now and then you'd have a few gophers come out on fire. Some good times out there doing that kind of stuff. We're all going to remember Papa as having a really, really strong moral compass. He just seemed to live right, live by example. Papa would never allow Dad to sell a bad cow or a bad horse, advertise as something better, even if it would fetch more money. He had integrity at all times. He didn't judge people. He rarely got mad. We were talking about this today. I don't remember him ever losing his temper. I think Dad and Aunt Louie and Aunt Shelley remember a few times, but it was far and few between. He never complained, even to the last days, like he's in so much pain, and he just wouldn't complain. He was an accommodating man. He wanted everyone to feel good, feel happy. Something that makes me really, really proud of Papa is how well he treated the staff, the hospital staff, in the last years being in the hospital. It didn't matter who was coming through that room, how much pain he was in, male, female, nurses, doctors, what language they spoke or color of their skin. Like he treated everyone with respect. And that was the same for everyone in his whole life. I read a quote the other day, as treat the janitor the same way you treat the CEO, and that was something Papa just lived by. He treated everyone the same way, with that quick wit and respect. Um, I wasn't at Rocky View a lot to see it in person, but I know he would have been the same way there. He was a simple man. He loved to read his Louis L'Amour westerns, and he'd read them and he'd read them again. And he had piles and piles of them. I don't know how many Louis L'Amour wrote, but he had probably read them all. And we can all remember jumping in the tractor, and Papa would have a cassette tape of Johnny Horton playing in there. And our family sure has listened to some Johnny Horton, and I can still memorize quite a few of the words. His Scotch mints, he always had. His duct tape, had something fixed up with duct tape, and he wouldn't wouldn't go buy anything new. He made time for us all, and he just had that way about him that you just craved his company. You wanted to be with him. I just want to share with you a little bit about Papa's last days. All of us, the family, spent a long time, probably, I don't know, 5, 10 years, worried about Papa's brain, his Alzheimer's, dementia, whatever you want to call it. I definitely worried about the possibility of him not remembering me, and that's a scary thing. But in the end, it was the cancer that took him, and I'm relieved to say that he had his mind right till the end. And his short term memory was pretty non-existent, but his long-term memory was incredible. And in the moment, he was like right there, and he'd memorize some things or recite some things. He wouldn't need to pull out folders just to fact check them. But it was pretty special what he had. One of my last encounters, I went to shake his hand to say goodbye, and he was getting a little more fragile, so I didn't shake his hand that hard. And he grabbed my hand and he pulled me, and he says, "What the hell kind of handshake is that?" He held so many of our hands and squeezed them hard and wouldn't let go. He wanted you to know, hey, I'm okay. I know what's going on here. I know what's happening. I love you guys. I love the times we've had. And don't be sad. I'm at peace, and the Lord has me. And he was, I think he was really content all the way. My final goodbye with Papa. I shook his hand harder this time. I said, "Papa, I want to thank you for the life that you've afforded me to be able to live and our family." I said, we had a pretty amazing, beautiful ranch, and I was the luckiest kid alive to be able to grow up on it. He replied, he said, "We certainly did, JD. It was a pretty amazing place. We were lucky." I said, "Papa, we spent a lot of time together, you and me, and we built a lot of great memories together, working on the ranch. You taking me to church, trail rides. You coming to so many of my hockey games. He didn't miss much, especially if it was close. He even got to come out to the Memorial Cup, a special time for me and our whole family. He taught me a lot, and he always supported me, and I can't thank you enough, Papa." He said, "JD, we sure did have a lot of special times together." He took a breath, and Aunt Shelley was there to witness this, and he kind of collected his thoughts, and he said to me, "It's important that your family knows what's become, the way they live now, and how it became." I acknowledged him. I know what he meant. I said, "I love you, Papa, and we're going to go for a ride soon, okay?" He said in the most typical Inuit fashion, "All right, you be in shape for it." A few weeks ago, Maddie and I had a baby boy. We named him James Wayland Watt. I didn't get to introduce Papa to my son in person, but I showed him lots of pictures and continually reminded him of his name. It meant a lot to me to have a boy and carry on this family name as I wear it so proud. Papa, if you can hear me now, your bloodline lives on, so does your first and last name. What I would give to have my boy have the same roots, upbringing, experiences, and lessons that you gave me on the VC Ranch. I can't replicate that, But what I can do is teach them to be hardworking, humble, kind, respectful, loving, and live life right by example, just like you've taught us all. I know you're not hunched over up anymore up there in heaven, standing up straight and smiling. Nothing could put me more at ease. From Dad, Mom, Sammy, and I, we love you and miss you. Thank you for everything.
I'm David Wyman. I'm a preacher, but I'm not going to preach to you. You've been here for an hour and a half. And as much as we've loved these memories and the family has enjoyed all of this, and the rest of us have sat in on it, remembering a man who is absolutely amazing. You're tired. You probably need the washroom. And it's just about time that we call it quits. But I cannot resist taking just a moment and talk to you about two words. What then? Barbara and I were missionaries in Mexico for many years, and we used to receive letters from young girls in their mission organizations and churches back in Canada and the States. The one that we will never forget to our dying day was from a little 8-year-old girl who said, "Dear Wymans, I'm so glad that you're there doing your work. I hear you're about to expire. What then?" And, that's a good question. It's not over. And this has been talked now all this time by each one to say of Ian, he knew it's not over. There's a real sense, and it's just begun. There is an eternal life out there of which he was absolutely sure he would be a part of from now on. Jesus took time right before his death, after a triumphant entry into Jerusalem and all. Jesus takes his 11 disciples apart and he says, "There's something I need to tell you. And that is this. Number one, let your hearts not be troubled. Don't be worried. Don't be afraid. You believe in God, so you can believe in me." An absolute certainty. They were falling apart. He had just told them that he was going to die, that he was going to be persecuted, murdered, and they couldn't handle that. What in the world is happening? This is our master. This is our rabbi, our teacher, our leader. And he's telling us that he's going to leave us and that things are going to be forever changed. And so Jesus says then, believe in God, you believe in me. And it was a declaration of peace. He tells them, "Peace I leave with you." And it's my kind of peace that I'm giving to you. Not like the world offers you peace, but this is a peace that you can have with God. Philippians, Paul adds a bit to this when he tells the church of Philippi, and the peace of God, which transcends, that is, goes far and above and beyond all understanding, that peace will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Can you bear one more story? I remember one time when the home-based church that Ian and Kay had helped us get started, we were meeting in their home. And one day, a man was driving down Highway 22, and he got distracted. We all know that word, don't we? He got distracted. He ran off the road and ran right through their fence. Ian goes out, and instead of what you would expect a typical rancher to do when 100 feet of his fence had been taken out, Ian goes up, chats with him for a bit, and invites him to come to church with them at their home the next Sunday. The man came and was a part of that little congregation for enough time to really get his heart straight and to take care of some of the problems that he had in his family. That was Ian. He had that kind of a peace. He could do the right thing at the right time. And over the years, we knew Ian mainly in the context of all that we did in church together. We worked together, began Bow Valley Baptist Church. Kay and Ian were a part of starting and growing the New Beginnings Home Church and met in 3 different places eventually. And the one thing that I do remember was when we finished Bible study and worship, in whatever situation it was, there would be Ian sitting and saying, "That was good." And it was that satisfied kind of response that really, after a while, we just waited for, because it made some of the difficulties really worthwhile. This was Jesus' opening line to his disciples. And then he says, this doesn't end everything. It just begins. In my Father's house, there are many places to live, to abide. Some translations say rooms. It really means much more than that. It means a permanent place where you can go and call home. And Jesus says, and if this wasn't true, if there's something untrue about that, I would have told you. I've known you these years. You know I would have. And more than that, just because of what's going to happen to me in a few hours, that's only the beginning. For I'm going to go back to my Father, and I'm going to prepare a place for you. That's an interesting word in the language that it was written, Greek. That you is both as a group, but also as an individual. So he was saying both as a group, I'm preparing a place, but it's a place for each one of you. What is heaven? What's it like? What is Ian experiencing or going to experience? And we don't understand how all of that will work out. But there are questions about it that we cannot help but ask, even from this limited 3-dimensional world. What is heaven? Where is it? How do I get to it? So, and my family knows I have kind of a weird sense of humor. I did what you ought to do. I took out my phone and I opened my GPS and I punched the mic button and I said, "Where is heaven?" I don't know what I really expected to hear back. Either "we don't know what you're talking about," or "don't be stupid," or something else. But I got 6 responses. I could choose my heaven. So here they are quickly. Home reno heaven in Cochran, where we live. Been there, done that. Heaven Artisan Gluten-Free Restaurant in Calgary. Touch of Heaven, which turns out to be a spiritist place where they fix the imbalances holistically in your life. That's over by the Northwest Costco. Then there, and some of you new parents might know this one, is Beanie Baby Heaven. Candy Heaven. I like that one. That's down more my alley. But my favorite is one that is one of Barbara's favorites too, and we go there frequently in Cochrane, and that's the Heavenly Outhouse, which is a boutique of all kinds of gifts and stuff and a lot of a really fun store. None of those, of course, are anything but silly when we're talking about eternal destiny. Heaven is real. It is there. It is the place. And Jesus then makes a promise to those disciples in John 14. He says, "I'm going to come back and I'm going to take you with me so that where I am eternally, you will be also." Amazing promise. November 1789, Benjamin Franklin wrote a publisher friend in Paris who had undergone, of course, the French Rebellion. And he wrote in regard to what the United States, had done with organizing this new, what they call a constitution. And he makes a comment like this: "Our new constitution is now established. Everything seems to promise to be durable. But in this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes." I'm not sure about the Constitution or taxes. Some out there seem to be able to avoid them. But death is certain. We have witnessed and have talked about Ian's death. I'm going to die. In fact, I'm 81 years old, and so that, even with good health, that's not far off, folks. You will too. And it doesn't matter your age or your status, you will experience death. And so that question comes back as we begin to conclude this. What then? The greatest of all questions, perhaps, in those 2 words. So Paul again returns to write to one of the churches, in this case, the church in Corinth. And he says, "But when this perishable," talking about life, "when this life that is perishable will have put on the imperishable, and this mortal person will have put on immortality, then will come about the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory." Death, where's your sting? You viper? You don't have a sting. Grave, where's your victory? You haven't won. You've lost. Our friend, our family, Ian, has just proved that. And we don't see that other side of it yet. But we all will, and we will all understand that this life that we have honored today, this life that had so much purpose and beauty and meaning and honor in it, was a life that has led to immortality with Christ. Thomas takes on Jesus. He always did. Thomas says, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how do we know the way? And that final thought for us to take home today, when Jesus says, Thomas, I am the way. I am the truth. I am life. And no one is going to be with God except through me. Jesus talked about rest over and over. The Bible, in fact, has two words for rest in the Greek translation. One of those words is anapousis. And anapousis simply means to rest up. It's the kind of rest that's taught through the New Testament. It's always the idea that the rest, and we just heard it from J.E., the rest that says there's something tomorrow to do, something that you need to prepare for. So it's a resting up. The other word for rest is katapousis, and that means to rest down. It's the word that was used in reference to God's creation of the earth. When he was done on the seventh day, it says he rested down, completed the task, no more to be done, it's all over, and now you enter into your time of rest. That's what we saw in Ian's life, and that's what we need to look forward to be able to say with the Bible, well done, good, faithful servant. You've been faithful in a few things, and now I'm going to make you a master over many. We're thankful for Ian, for his life. I'm mostly thankful for the example that he set for us and for you to live life fully according to what God's plan is for you, so that when that time comes, you can rest down, knowing that immortality is your future. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this beautiful time together. Thank you for the opportunity to honor Ian, whom we respected, admired, and loved. And we pray that you would guide our hearts and our thoughts and our minds, that each of us would be, until that day comes for us, all that you want us to be, to think, to do, to act upon. In Christ's name, amen. Barry, one last song.
Let's stand and close with Rock of Ages. Rock of ages, cleft for me. Let me hide myself in thee. Let the water and the blood from thy wounded side which flow be of sin the double cure. Save from wrath and make me pure. Not the labors of my hands can fulfill thy law's demands. These for sin cannot atone. Thou must save, and thou alone. In my hand no price I bring. Simply to the cross I cling. While I draw this fleeting breath, when mine eyes shall close in death, when I rise to worlds unknown, and behold thee on thy throne, Rock of ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee.